Okay, let's unpack this. You know how sometimes you just get hooked on something? Like
Yeah.
truly, maybe even pathologically obsessed.
Uh-huh.
For me right now, it's Jalen Brunson.
Challenge.
A challenge to what?
To the league's priorities. Its marketing, its operations, how it evaluates and, showcases talent. It's framed as a fundamental conflict, really.
A fundamental conflict. Wow. Okay, so our mission today is to deep dive into this surprising perspective. Why is Jalen Brunson's game, according to these sources, potentially the league's worst nightmare?
Great.
We're going to break down why his style is seen this way and what it might say about, well, the state of basketball right now.
So the sources immediately position Brunson as a kind of throwback killer. That's the term they use.
Throwback killer. I like that.
Yeah, and it compares him specifically to, like, a 1990s point guard, arguing his game runs totally counter to the current era's flash and, pure athleticism.
A 90s point guard.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense when you actually watch him play. He's not like exploding from the logo or launching those absurd off-balance threes like some guys.
No.
He's not built like a tank just driving through everyone either.
No, the description is more like surgical, deliberate, methodical. It's a game played with immense control and precision, not necessarily overwhelming physical gifts.
And the sources argue that because he lacks that obvious flash,
Yeah.
His game gets kind of overlooked, or
Right.
maybe undervalued.
Right.
Yet here he is consistently dropping 30-plus points night after night. He's doing it without being a freak athlete, without solely living behind the three-point line.
And this is where the source makes its central claim, that Brunson is, like, undeniable proof that fundamental basketball skill, that craft, can still matter more than just raw athleticism in today's game. He wins with technique, with smarts.
Which then leads to this fascinating and, frankly, pretty controversial point the sources make, that the NBA itself seems almost hesitant to fully embrace players like Brunson.
Uh-huh. The argument is the league has become, well, maybe a bit obsessed with TikTok superstardom and highlight reels. Those quick hits.
TikTok superstardom.
Yeah, I can see that.
This perspective suggests the current league focuses heavily on generating viral content. The thunderous dunks, the mind-bending dribble moves, the deep logo shots.
The plays that are instantly shareable on social media, the clips. Exactly. And Brunson's game just doesn't really produce that kind of content consistently. You're not getting windmill dunks or step-back bombs from the parking lot.
Right. So what do you get? I mean, you see him backing guys down, using these subtle hesitations, leveraging angles. He just plain outsmarts defenders a lot of the time.
Yeah, and the comparison the sources use is pretty telling. He looks more like, say, Mark Jackson operating in the post than maybe Kyrie Irving breaking ankles out on the perimeter.
That's a great comparison.
And the claim is this is a major reason why he doesn't get that mainstream MVP consideration, even though he's putting up elite scoring numbers and leading a winning team often deep into the playoffs.
And the media descriptions mentioned in the sources really highlight this disconnect, right? Words like solid, steady, or even surprising.
Yeah, the source argues calling him surprising is the ultimate sign you maybe don't understand what constitutes high-level real basketball anymore.
Because it's only surprising if you're looking for the wrong things, I guess. Like the flash instead of the substance.
That seems to be the implication, yeah. Okay, but the sources have this really wild take on the whole New York angle. This is interesting.
Oh, yeah?
The claim is that playing in the biggest basketball market, New York City, is paradoxically hurting his career narrative nationally.
Wait, hurting him? That seems completely backward. New York is supposed to amplify everything, right?
That's what you'd think.
Yeah.
But the sources argue the city is maybe hungry for a different kind of savior, someone with that undeniable, like, Allen Iverson energy, that kind of raw charisma.
Okay.
They suggest New York isn't fully appreciating the quiet, consistent dominance. The sources call it Tim Duncan production, which is quite a comparison.
Tim Duncan production versus Allen Iverson energy. Okay, I see the contrast.
And the rationale, or the theory anyway, is that perhaps New Yorkers, after decades of these intense hype cycles that, let's be honest, often led to disappointment.
Yeah, there's been some pain.
They struggle to fully embrace a player who just performs at an elite level without all the external flash, the social media drama, the big persona. He's just, focused on the game.
And the sources even suggest the media there might be subconsciously underhyping him, maybe to avoid another cycle of getting burned by hype.
It's a really provocative idea, and it places him in this interesting category, maybe with Patrick Ewing, as potentially the first true New York basketball hero in that specific substance over style mold since him.
Wow, okay. That's a heavy comparison, but I see the thread.
Now, if we dive into the technical side, like how he actually achieves this elite production, the sources dedicate a good chunk of space to his footwork. They call it his secret weapon.
Oh, his footwork is just,
Yes.
it's art. Seriously, it's not about raw speed. It's about manipulating space.
Exactly.
Out-angling opponents, his subtle post-ups, the pivots, those little inside fakes. It's incredibly effective, and honestly, it's beautiful to watch if you appreciate the nuances.
The sources actually describe it as Kobe-level footwork.
Kobe level. For a point guard, that's huge praise.
It is. And they argue it's maybe underrated because the league's focus has shifted away from appreciating that kind of foundational craft, especially when it's used for mid-range jumpers or patient post-ups, not just drives or threes.
Yeah, he uses it to get to his spots for those, like, 15-footers, those lethal one-dribble pull-ups. Code for what?
Code for the league, or maybe the mainstream media not really knowing how to categorize or appreciate his unique game.
Explain that a bit more.
Well, they argue we don't hear Steph Curry or Chris Paul constantly referred to dismissively as undersized in quite the same way, do we?
Not really, no.
Because their games fit a different, more easily marketable narrative. Steph's the GOAT shooter, CP3 is the point god, the floor general maestro. There's a hook.
Okay, so the source's point is Brunson doesn't have that one single headline-grabbing gimmick. He's not just the shooter or just the passer or just the driver.
Exactly. He's just consistently elite at, well, pretty much everything you need from a lead guard. Scoring, playmaking, decision-making.
Right.
And the sources argue this broad fundamental mastery is what makes him underrated, not truly undersized. Like, he's not small for his production. His wide skill set is just maybe undervalued by the current narrative focus.
Okay, so this blend of skill and intelligence. The sources argue that's why his game is actually perfectly built for the playoffs.
Yeah, this makes complete sense when you think about how playoff basketball changes, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, the game slows down, possessions become more deliberate, more grinding, schemes tighten up significantly.
Like, defenses lock in more.
And those moments...
Decision-making, his control, and that killer footwork we talked about really shine. He's not reliant on just creating space through pure explosion. He manipulates it.
Championship as the clear #1 option
Yeah.
would be the league's worst nightmare.
The worst nightmare. That sounds incredibly dramatic. Why on earth would a team winning a championship be a negative for the league?
Okay, the reasoning presented is that a Brunson championship would fundamentally disrupt the prevailing narrative. The story the league has arguably been building for years.
What narratives is that?
The myth, or maybe just the marketing preference, that you absolutely need a specific physical archetype to win at the highest level. You know, the 6'8" super athlete, the deep shooting cyborg, the physical freak.
Ah, I see. Because Brunson winning would prove that elite IQ, masterful footwork, and those fundamental skills, they can still be the recipe for winning a title, even without that specific physical profile.
Precisely. And the sources argue that kind of outcome isn't easily marketable within the current framework. How do you create quick viral highlights of his precise footwork setting up a mid-range shot?
Right, it's harder than a poster dunk or a half-court shot.
Or his patient decision-making breaking down a defense. His championship wouldn't necessarily be built on those isolated spectacular moments, but on consistent, intelligent, maybe less visually explosive execution.
So, the argument is, if Brunson wins it all as the guy, the NBA would be almost forced to shift its marketing focus back towards basketball itself. The craft, the intelligence, the fundamental.
Instead of just the most physically spectacular plays.
And the sources suggest this is why, maybe subconsciously, maybe not, the league might not actually desire that outcome. Because it complicates the current marketing push.
That's the controversial implication, yes. So, to kind of bring this deep dive full circle, the sources essentially position Jalen Brunson as this sort of countercultural figure in the NBA right now. He represents what the future of basketball should be, at least in their view.
Even if the current league model is maybe pushing in a different direction.
Exactly. It's craft, patience, skill over sheer flash, results over easy marketability. It's a powerful statement against some of the prevailing trends.
Yeah.
In a basketball landscape that feels increasingly populated by players whose games sometimes seem built for, as the source calls it, YouTube mixtape stardom.
Ah, mixtape stardom.
Brunson is presented as a true technician, a fundamentalist master.
He's framed almost as a rebellion against the modern game, maybe a walking contradiction to the algorithms that dictate what kind of plays and players get the most attention online. He's just, well, the source says, a real hooper.
Yeah. And the implicit call to action from the sources seems to be, if you value that kind of basketball, you should be watching Jalen Brunson very closely right now.
Because even if the league or the wider narrative is slow to embrace it.
True high-level skill and intelligence will always find a way to win. And maybe that appreciation will eventually catch up.
So there you have it, a deep dive into this.
Yeah.
Really fascinating, and according to our sources, yeah, a highly controversial idea that Jalen Brunson's incredibly effective, fundamentally brilliant game is actually somehow at odds with the modern marketing-driven NBA.
It really forces you to look at the game differently, doesn't it? And ask yourself what you value more. Is it the raw athleticism and the highlight potential that dominates social media feeds?
Or is it the deep skill, the intelligence, the consistent execution that wins games when it matters most, especially in the playoffs?
It makes you wonder how talent is really evaluated and marketed today. Can this kind of foundational greatness ever be as marketable as pure spectacle?
Or will it always be seen as somehow, I don't know, less than by the mainstream just because it's not as visually explosive?
Yeah, it raises the question, in the current media landscape, is there true value placed on mastery of the craft itself, or maybe just on those moments of physical impossibility?
Thinking about all this, what stands out to you the most about Jalen Brunson's game after hearing this perspective? We'd love to know. Is it his footwork, his ability to be an elite scorer without being this physical marvel?
Or maybe the idea that the whole league narrative might not actually be built to embrace someone like him?
Yeah, let us know. And consider the big question the sources really leave us wrestling with.
Just
Can Jalen Brunson truly lead a team to an NBA championship as the undisputed #1 option? The sources argue not only that he can, but that if he does, it would represent a fundamental challenge to the league's current direction.
It's definitely a question worth seriously considering based on everything we've discussed today.
It really is. So if you found this deep dive interesting, if this perspective on skill versus marketing resonated with you, we'd be incredibly grateful if you could do a couple of quick things for us.
Please do.
First, please hit that like button for this deep dive. It genuinely helps us out a lot. Second, make sure you subscribe to the deep dive so you don't miss our next exploration into topics like this one.
And finally,
Let us know your thoughts. Answer that big question for us in the comments or wherever you engage. Can Jalen Brunson lead a team to an NBA championship? We'd really love to hear your perspective. Thanks for diving deep with us today.